Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mike Greenlief from Giant Spoon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today. So kind of the thesis of what I want to be talking about today is around this idea of connected storytelling and how we can use all of the data that we're collecting on consumers today to start to power more than just delivering ads, and how we can start to kind of connect them on a much more deeper, more emotional level that's really going to truly deliver, value from these consumers to the brands that we represent, that we work on, or that we work at. So, as Shay mentioned, I'm Mike Greenlief. I lead communication strategy at Giant Spoon. Just a little bit of background on Giant Spoon so you can kind of get an understanding of sort of our place in the world and sort of what we do. So we're essentially an ad agency, where we're kind of founded on the premise of where culture, strategy, innovation, content, media, all of these different things collide. So we try to position ourselves as an agency for the CMO now, where we're kind of founded on this sort of white space where you have these creative agencies in the world where they're focused more on the production of TV spots and banner ads and print ads and out-of-home boards, and really where they can monetize themselves making money from the production of all these creative assets. And then on the other side of the equation, you have a media agency, and where the industry has gone with media agencies is focusing more on efficiencies and bulk buying and all these different programmatic ad tech sort of platforms, which is kind of where the industry is evolving. But we saw that there's a white space where we can kind of inject ourselves in the middle of those two things and really be that agency for the CMO, where we help make the creative more impactful and the creative more innovative. We help the media be more strategic and deliver greater value to consumers and to the brands overall. So we represent a lot of clients, everything from entertainment clients like Amazon Studios, NBC, Epix, tech platforms like a Spotify. We have retail with Old Navy, we have HP, we have Red Bull, GE, a lot of different clients across a lot of different industries, which gives us a lot of breadth in the different things that we do. We've won some awards. We recently won a couple Media Plan of the Year awards. We've won Lion Award. We received Creative Agency of the Year by Media Post for the past 2 years, and third place at a local bowling tournament, which is the award I'm most proud of. We just try harder. We're not the best, but we try hard. So really kind of what it boils down to and what we do for our clients is around this idea of storytelling. So where the brand strategy side of the equation tries to figure out what story does a client need to tell, the communication strategy side of the equation figures out how to tell that story. And more so than ever before in the industry, stories are the most important thing that a brand can do for a consumer. And brands really today are modern storytellers for the 21st century. And what that means is they're the ones out there creating content. They're the ones brokering all these content deals with these big media publishers. They're the ones starting to control that content and media paradigm to tell the stories of their brands and to make an impact. And the reason behind all of that is stories are the most impactful things that a brand can do, because brands operate sort of in this world of like myths. They tell a story to try to position themselves as to doing something in the world, and that's what resonates with consumers. The reason storytelling works so well is because storytelling from a consumer standpoint, actually, if you look at it from a neurological level, increases the dopamine in a person's brain and actually makes them more likely to remember messages and actually more likely to remember the things that they're seeing from brands. And that's why storytelling is so important nowadays. And when I'm talking about stories, I'm not talking about some long form, 5-minute long video that you just have to sit there and watch and really immerse yourselves in. Stories nowadays with the brand are really around a central narrative. And what I mean by that is, what is that thing that your brand stands for, and what is that thing that you represent, and what are all the ways into that world? So I think a great example of this is actually one of our clients, GE. So GE is, from a cultural perception standpoint, is 100-plus-year-old company, monolithic, may come across, they've been around for a while, and really, they're actually the world's first startup, in a way. And they want to tell that story. They want to tell this innovation story that, makes them stand apart and seem, futuristic and, progressive. And so everything that we do for GE as a brand is around this innovation story, but it comes to life in many different forms. So, it's come to life through actually sneakers that we created that actually have space-age materials in the sneaker that were used on the first moon landing. That tells an innovation story by their space-age materials, but it reaches an audience of younger sneakerheads. We've done things where we've created long-form podcasts, where we've engaged and we've injected GE scientists into these podcasts, these fictional podcasts, to tell that innovation story for the GE brand. So it's come to life in many different forms, but it's really circling around that central narrative of innovation. And the point of great stories for brands is really to solve great tensions. And what I mean by tensions is, what are those, from a storytelling standpoint, what are those contradictions in people's lives that they're trying to figure out? What are those gaps in between consumer truths and what we truly believe as a consumer, and what are those cultural perceptions out in the world? Because our lives operate in a vast land of sort of contradictions. Like, I think a great example of this is from a tension standpoint is, we've just started the season of fall, right? So let's take seasons, for example. Spring. Spring from a cultural perception standpoint is it's bright, it's sunny, it's flowers, it's bunnies, it's all of these different types of things. But do you know spring is actually the most hated season of the world, or of all the seasons by consumers? People actually hate spring. And what that does is that actually articulates a tension there. Because from a cultural standpoint, people think, from a cultural standpoint, it's like people love spring because of the way that we've sort of positioned it in the world. But from a consumer truth standpoint, people don't like it. So what can brands do to start to operate in that tension, in that white space that's been created? What stories can we tell as a brand that help solve those contradictions that people have in the world? I think Coke is a great example of this, in a brand that's sort of revolving around a central tension and then also telling a story that focuses in on a central narrative. So if you think about Coke, everything they do from a brand standpoint revolves around happiness. And that comes to life in a lot of different ways. So you see it through, polar bears at Christmas time. You see it through their Share a Coke campaign, share a moment of happiness with somebody. You see it through this example right here on the slide behind me, is that you see it with a Hug a Coke vending machine. So this was actually a vending machine that they spent $5,000 on to make. All you do is you go up to get a Coke, you have to hug it. As soon as you hug the vending machine, you get a Coke. This actually generated 51 million impressions in earned media value for a $5,000 investment. That's it. And it really articulated this idea of happiness. Give it a hug, get a Coke, and you become happy. It's really sort of the tension that it's trying to solve in the world is this idea of happiness. We're living in a moment of stress and turmoil and all of the things going on in the world. So Coke can interject itself in that tension and try to create this just moment of happiness for consumers, even if it's a brief moment where it's just them drinking a 12-ounce soda. It's a tension that they're operating in the world, and they're creating emotional connection. Because if you think about Coke, it's brown sugar water, but it's created such a deep emotional connection with people that you have people out in the world that are die-hard Coke loyalists. They won't even consider drinking Pepsi because that's the connection that they've made with consumers based on this tension. And so kind of going around all of these different tensions that I'm talking about, they're really designed to create connections with consumers. The stories that we tell solve tensions. The tensions create connections because we're solving those contradictions for people. So the first sort of connection that we're making with consumers is these rational connections. Solving a problem or a tension for them in the world that's very simplistic, very rational based, one where we're starting to build trust. And so as we're thinking about that, that really just means, we're helping you solve a problem. We're helping you save money. We're fixing something for you. Very basic rational connections where it's like, okay, I like you. You're helping me, and it feels easy. The second connection that really brands are really trying to make with consumers that operate in this world of tensions is this idea of delightful connections. And this is a moment where it's really just all about just creating a moment of awe and making them say, holy cow, that's cool. I really like that. And just giving them a brief moment of kind of just this, happiness in a way, kind of like Coke. I think a great example of, creating a delightful connection that operates in a world of tension is if you think back to Old Spice, and when they came out with the campaign for the man your man can smell like. And you've seen all those ads where it had the shirtless guy riding the horse and talking to, your man can smell like me, if you guys are familiar with that campaign. But what it did is it operated in this tension where doing their research, the perception is that guys are going to the grocery store, going to the market, wherever it may be, and they're buying their own body wash, but they're not. Actually showed that their wives or their girlfriends or their partners or whoever it may be are actually buying their body wash for them. So they took this tension there and figured out how they can inject themselves in there and create something that was creatively funny enough for men, but spoke to women. The man your man can smell like, your man to smell like the man that's shirtless riding this horse right here. So they operated sort of in this world, and all the content wasn't functionally based, talking about how great the stuff smelled. It created just this fun, delightful moment of like, oh, that's hilarious. I want my man to smell like him. I'm going to go buy him Old Spice body wash. And it made it more acceptable for guys because the commercials were great. They were funny. They laughed. So if their wife or their girlfriend or whoever it was bought them Old Spice, they're okay with it. The last kind of sort of connection that we're making with brands and consumers based on operating these tensions is this idea of an emotional connection. You almost look at this as almost like a hierarchy of needs in a way, where the last and sort of most important, if you look at like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like self-actualization, here it's emotional connection. And it's really about what is that deep ingrained connection that a brand has with a consumer that can't be broken. It's that Coke level connection, where you have diehard loyalists for Coke. It's that Apple level connection where you have Apple fans who will never consider touching a Samsung device. It's that deep level of connection. And when I'm talking about sort of an emotional level sort of connection, it's not about making somebody laugh or making somebody cry or making them angry or whatever it may be. It's a lot of different things. There have been numerous studies that have come out from like Harvard Business Review and other trades that talk about what constitutes an emotional connection with consumers. And it's everything from giving them a thrill, it's giving them a sense of freedom, helping them achieve something, making their lives easier, all of these different things. And what these connections do is it gives us sort of entry points that we can place our brand based on what our sort of competencies are, if you will. And what I mean by that is if we know that we're a brand that can really help make our consumers' lives easier, let's focus ourselves on that connection versus some of these other ones. Really lean into what we know that we do well. And when we go into this idea of emotion, the reason it works so well is because advertising at its best evokes emotion. It evokes these feelings of people. It's not these rational feelings, but it's emotionally led, emotionally charged messaging that really builds a bond with the consumer. There have been numerous studies out there that really speak to how emotionally charged messaging really drives brand value and brand performance. There was a study done actually this year by Nielsen that said that emotionally led messaging and emotionally connected consumers have a 23% lift in sales for their brands. There have been other studies done by Bath University who talk about how ads with low to little emotional content actually have no impact on a consumer's perception. They have no impact on effectiveness at all. And then there was other studies done by the IPA which spoke to the same thing. Ads with low rational content or anything like that actually have the highest affinity, the highest effectiveness, the highest performance for brands in terms of engaging consumers. So it's all about emotion and less about rationality. And this is just a quick study here too, done by Harvard Business Review, that showed that brands that are connected with consumers emotionally and have emotionally connected consumers, they actually are considered to be 52% more valuable than the average consumer. And if you look at some of these categories, here behind me, if you look at like a household cleaner, you see 103% emotional, 103% more value from an emotionally connected consumer. And if you think about it, you're like, who's connected to their laundry detergent? But it's true. If you think about it, you go to the store and you see Tide on the shelf, you're gonna buy Tide because they've created emotional connection with you. If you look at, say, the household cleaner category as a whole, the products it's relative parity. But because Tide has made an emotional connection with you, you're gonna buy it when all it does is clean your clothes. So it just goes to show that no matter what category that you're in or what your level of involvement is within a consumer's lives day to day, emotional connections are vitally important. And the reason behind all of this is really because from a consumer standpoint, we don't know why we do what we do. If you look at neurosciences and you look at psychology, 90% of all of consumer purchase decisions are actually made on a subconscious emotional level. They're not based on any sort of rationality. They're based on a subconscious feeling in their minds that they need something, they need to buy this, whatever it may be. And they then justify it on the back end with rationality. I saved money. The car has great safety features. This is going to make this is going to help my child, whatever it may be. It's all, they justify it rationally, but it's all emotionally charged. You bought the car with great safety features because it's going to keep your family safe, which you have the emotional connection to. You didn't buy those jeans because they stretched. You bought those jeans because they make your ass look good. Like, it's all these emotional connections to these brands and these products that we're buying that's driving these purchases. So really what it boils down to is it's not what you say, it's how you say it. What can you say to create these connections with consumers? And this is kind of where it starts to get into sort of this data space. And what I've been kind of the thesis of this sort of presentation is using data to power an ads, is that right now we're at a moment in the industry where we have more data on consumers than ever before. 90% of all consumer data has been captured in the last 2 years. And CMO surveys coming out speak to the fact that they're going to continue to increase funding from marketing budgets to fund the acquisition and generation of more data. It's going to go up 68% over the next 3 years. So we know more about them ever before. And since we do, we can connect with them on different levels than what we've traditionally been able to do when it was just a time of focus group research and surveys and those types of things. Now we know why people are doing what they're doing and what they're doing because we can tap into, key behavioral insights. The problem is that the more data that we're collecting on consumers, the less we know what to do with it. It's almost like paralysis by analysis. The more we know about a consumer, the more we're removing ourselves from them because we just don't know how to activate it all. So it gets into a point where it's paralysis by analysis, as I said, and the default behavior is, let's just go with what we know works, which oftentimes is putting a lot of messaging into more lower funnel, hardworking kind of direct response media, retargeting, abandoned cart messaging, programmatic DSPs, all of those types of things. And that's good. It's actually, it works. We wouldn't all be here if it didn't work. But what we need to do is we need to find that right balance between the emotional connection of brand building and the emotional connection we can create with the data that we're capturing on consumers, and blend that with the rationally based messaging of direct response and programmatic and all of those different types of things. But the problem is that what we're seeing now in the industry too, and why emotional messaging is so important, is that consumers right now are doing everything that they can to block traditional advertising. And that's why emotional connections and thinking out of the realm of traditional media is so important. Just looking at all these stats right here, more than 25% of internet users are expected to block ads. Viewability concerns. People are skipping, pre-roll video on YouTube. You have people that are willing to pay to not even view advertising-related content. You can subscribe to YouTube right now through a paid model, so you never see a YouTube ad ever again. So consumers are trying to do what they can to avoid ads at all costs. And this is because the model has changed. And I never thought I'd use a Homer Simpson quote in a presentation, but there was a great Homer quote where he actually said he was getting interrupted while he's watching TV, and he hushes Lisa and he goes, the commercials are on. If we don't watch these, it's like we're stealing TV. And that's how it used to be. If you didn't watch a commercial, you were almost like you were stealing TV because the commercials were designed to subsidize the cost of your entertainment. But now with fragmentation of media, people being able to consume entertainment and content however they want, whenever they want, they don't have to watch ads anymore because their content's getting subsidized elsewhere. They're paying for Netflix, they're paying for Hulu, they're paying for Amazon, so they don't have to watch the ads. So that's why we need to figure out how do we connect with them beyond just these ad-like objects that we're putting out in the world. And so we're really at a point where we can take all of this data that we're capturing and these tensions that we're seeing in the world, these contradictions between truths and perceptions, and start to put them together to make connections with have our brands make connections with consumers and make those deeper, sort of more emotionally led connections. But in order to do so, we kind of need to suspend our traditionally held beliefs around what data is. Data is not just what you're getting from Omnichannel, in terms of .com performance or what you're seeing in Google Analytics. Data is not just what's housed in your data management platforms or what your programmatic partnerships are telling you. There's other forms of data that we can really tap into to create these emotional connections and really dive deep into what's driving consumer behavior today. You were talking, social media listening. We're talking, digging into behavioral insights by actually being able to plant cameras in people's homes and watch why they brush their teeth or how they brush their teeth and all of these different types of things. There's new forms of data capture that we can start to tap into that gives us consumer behavioral insights that we can create emotional connections based off of. So kind of walking through all of this, I kind of want to start to show sort of the proof in the pudding in a way, where start to show how different brands and different companies are starting to activate their data in unique ways to create these emotional connections with consumers. So kind of taking those three sort of buckets that I had earlier, emotional, delightful, and rational, and really starting to showcase some brands that are bringing this to life. This one right here, Cannes Lion Award. In terms of use of data and creativity. This is actually for the Tennessee Visitors Bureau. And what they needed to do is they actually needed to create more, essentially traffic to Tennessee, get tourism to go up. But what they realized is what they were missing an opportunity was with road trips. There were 11 key markets that were within, a short drive of key kind of Tennessee landmarks, like Grand Ole Opry, Broadway, whatever it may be. And so what they did is they took these 11 markets and they crafted 24 different road trips and these custom unique road trips to get to these different kind of points, these different destinations that people would like. And then they turned them into 1-minute road trip videos. So they created 24 minutes of content across these 24 videos and put them out online through a highly targeted ad campaigns, using social listening conversation data, tapping into targeting people who were talking about going on vacation, targeting people who were in these markets that, had talked about going to Tennessee, and served up this video content to them. And once the consumer engaged with that content, they were taken to a destination that actually planned that road trip for them. So it told them the exact routes that they needed to go on this road trip. It told them, the different places that they should stop on the way. If they needed to get a hotel to stay at, it recommended the hotels for them. So all you have to really do is say, go, and you're done. You've basically taken the pain of planning travel out of the equation, and we've solved the problem for them by alleviating their hesitancy to go on vacation because we did all. This next example is for Netflix. So Netflix was launching in France in 2014, and there was some significant concerns that they had with how Netflix was going to be received over there based on culture and based on streaming behaviors and how they would consume were consuming content in another country. And so what they did, and this goes into kind of the suspending our beliefs of data, is that they actually went and mined and monitored 2 years worth of social conversation data in France to start to understand what people were saying about the streaming behaviors, what they were saying about content consumption, what they were saying about like what their hesitancies were to say subscribe to a Netflix or something like that, and use that data to power real-time GIF-based ads, so like animated GIFs, GIF-based ads out in the world that spoke to those hesitations. So if you're walking through, say, a subway, you get a digital ad that's a GIF that would have somebody's face pop up and kind of be a scene from a show that would say, skeptical? We'll try Netflix for free for a month and reduce all your skepticism. And so they were powering these with the real-time insights that they were getting from these social conversations, powering these with messaging that they knew that was core to these kind of human truths about streaming. And then they also tapped into real-time contextual data to serve up these ads and rotate in new creative. So if you were walking through the mall during the holidays and it was a madhouse, you would actually get a GIF of a zombie apocalypse and a bunch of zombies running through the mall. That was all speaking to shows that you could watch on Netflix. So just ways to kind of create different creative content based on the data that we're finding. And this actually increased Netflix's awareness in France from, I believe it was 27% up to 68%. And they were averaging about 29,000 new followers a day on social media due to this campaign. Spotify, full disclosure, this is a Giant Spoon client, but Spotify is a brand that's really killing it in the streaming space. And if you read a ton of articles, they're all talking about how Spotify is winning the streaming wars versus Apple. And a big part of that is through their use of data. So I don't know if you guys are Spotify users in here. I'm an avid Spotify user. But they have these playlists that they create for you called Discover Weekly and Release Radar. And what Discover Weekly is, it's a customized playlist delivered to you every single Monday based on your listening behaviors over the past few weeks. So they purchased a company called Echo, which is helping power some of their algorithms and some of their data. And based on what I'm listening to on a week-by-week basis, it's serving me up new music, because everybody knows how hard it is to find new music and what we're going to like and what's new and what's fresh. So it's taking this sort of model of it takes what I'm listening to, looks at what other people are listening to that are similar to my taste, and starts to curate these playlists and send them out to people. And they're doing the same thing with new music through their Release Radar platform. And the reason this is winning is because this really taps into this idea of, for consumers, this anticipation economy, where consumers also almost have this expectation of clairvoyance now for brands. They don't want you to react to them. They want you to tell them what to do and how to act, what you need, and all of these different types of things. And Spotify is doing that. They're predicting what your music needs are by giving you these sort of custom playlists each week. And then Macy's, the other one, is kind of creating a rational connection through their partnership with IBM Watson, and using IBM Watson to be basically an artificial intelligence shopping assistant in the stores. So what this does is you can pull up your smartphone when you're in the store, and you can actually use natural language to search for things that are in the Macy's store, and it'll direct you to where you need to go find them. So you could say, I'm looking for brown dress shoes to wear with the blue suit. Okay, Mike, you need to go down this way and you'll find them in this aisle here, and you'll be able to browse all the different brown dress shoes that we have. And then it starts to build up this robust database of then all of my shopping behaviors of what I'm shopping for in a Macy's store. And the difference is you can do that online right now. If I'm going to Macy's.com and I'm searching for things, it's building up this sort of buyer profile of what I'm looking at, what I'm buying. The difference in the store is context. I'm in the store right now. So now not only is it able to look at what I'm searching for in the store, but if they're tracking my location throughout the store, they know where I'm walking. They know the paths I'm taking. They know what other products I'm stopping at. They know all of this different data that they can put to use that can inform everything from product bundling. If they're seeing a lot of people that buy jeans buy a lot of sweaters, maybe we put the jeans and sweaters together. If they see that people, as they're navigating the store, tend to go this way and they walk over here and they stop here, maybe that impacts store layout to make a more customized, curated shopping experience. Because the difference, as I've said before here, is context. It's what you're doing in store, which has been a very, very hard thing to track for so long. The next one, kind of getting into sort of delightful connections and talking about like sort of those moments of shock and awe. This first example that I have, it's actually a video. It's one of my favorites. But there was a horror film festival in Sweden. So hopefully you guys won't be too afraid by this. But it was a horror film fest in Sweden that wanted to get members of this sort of society, this horror film fest society, to come to their festival the subsequent year. So since these are all members, you have basic data on them. You have phone numbers, you have addresses, you have emails, you have all of this stuff. What's a good way we can put it to use to scare the shit out of some people personally? So let's watch. We'll skip ahead, but basically every single person that was a member responded immediately saying, I am dead meat and I want to come to the next film festival. So to me, why I love this one so much is the beauty is in the simplicity. You just need a phone number, an address that you can go to Google Earth and find their home, and just a small behavioral insight of what do you do when you get a call or a message from a number you don't know? You Google it. So let's buy up all the paid search ads around that phone number and scare the shit out of some people. And they love it because they're horror film fans. So of course they're going to want to be scared. So this is just the beauty is in the simplicity. Just this easy way to connect with people based on that kind of those key behavioral insights. This one right here, STX, another Giant Spoon client, full disclosure, but they are a sort of a mini major movie studio. They kind of like a Lionsgate. So their first movie that they came out with was it's a movie called The Gift. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but basically brief synopsis. Jason Bateman has a guy from his past in high school that he used to pick on. This guy, decides to, reappear in Jason Bateman's life and start leaving him gifts that are all tied to things that, from their past, from when Jason Bateman used to kind of terrorize him in high school. So we needed to come out with something big and something bold to really launch this movie. And so the core kind of theme of the movie is the fact that your past never really leaves you. And that's never been more true due to social media, because now we can find anything about everybody through their social media content. And so what we did is we actually went out and scoured the social media profiles of journalists, of influencers, of people in the movie industry, and found these kind of really weird things that they posted in the past on Twitter, on Facebook, or whatever it may be, and sent them a personalized gift with that. So we found out somebody had a huge affinity for red Starburst, so we sent them a pound of red Starburst. We found out somebody had broken a coffee mug that they loved so dear 3 years prior, so we actually went out and found that coffee mug and sent it to them as a gift from your friend Gordo, who is Joel Edgerton's character in the movie that was stalking Jason Bateman. So it was these moments of just kind of like surprise and delight, kind of awe sort of things, because you had these journalists getting these gifts going like, how did they know I had this coffee mug? Who is this Gordo guy? Where did this come from? And then we got them to start to write about it, post about it socially, create content about it, which builded up the press and the buzz for the movie. And this, to me, is a great example because it taps into suspending the beliefs of data. It's not just about what we're capturing in analytic data. It's starting to think creatively about what are those other data sources that we can tap into to start to unearth insights that we can activate upon. This is another great example from Snickers. So Snickers, you're not you when you're hungry, sort of the angry campaign. They actually went out and created what's called the Snickers hungerism, where they went out and mined social media conversation and measured the sentiment of all of this conversation. So are people happy? Are people angry? And the angrier people got, the cheaper the price of a Snickers. So they did a partnership with 7-Eleven that showed as soon as it hit certain levels of anger or negativity in the world through all the social conversation, consumers could go online to Snickers and actually lock in their price at 7-Eleven. So you could get a Snickers bar for 50 cents if you wanted to, based on everybody in the world being angry at the time. And it just tapped into the fact that you're not you when you're angry and when you're hungry, and that whole sort of hangry kind of mood. And this is just another great example of sort of a delightful moment and looking beyond just the traditional realms of data and looking at social media data again. This last one here from a delightful standpoint is around Madden. So this actually won numerous awards as well. This was done in partnership with EA and with Google, where they created the Madden Giferator. So all these GIFs that you're seeing on the screen behind me, what they did is Madden was starting to lose relevance with consumers. People just weren't playing Madden video games anymore. And they needed to start to increase, the relevance of Madden within sort of consumer landscape and within the football space. And so what they need to do is figure out a way they can start to participate in that conversation of football more fully. And so while they knew that, consumers are watching football all weekend, every weekend, I'm one of them, I'm guilty of it. While they're watching it on the screen, all of the conversations that they're having around football are happening socially. So they're, tweeting back and forth with their friends, talking crap to one another, posting each other's Facebook walls. They're doing all of the social conversations around the game. So Madden need to figure out, how do we inject ourselves into that space? How do we inject ourselves into where people are consuming football content on the second screen while the game is going on their first screen? And so what they did here is they actually started to pull in real-time game insights and serve up real-time GIFs to consumers that they could take and share out socially with their friends. So when Cam Newton scores a touchdown and a GIF is already created where he's ripping off his microphone and he's ripping off his jersey and it says Super Cam is back. They can take that and send that to their friend who is a Seahawks fan that just got scored upon and start to build that social currency. So it just started a way to start to look at data in a new way to look at real-time insights. The last one, kind of emotional connections and those deep levels and what some brands are doing there. Nike's a great one where they've really started to create a deep emotional connection with consumers around the fact that everybody is an athlete. They know going out that everybody can make a great pair of running shoes, but what they can't do is tell a story around those running shoes as good as Nike. And the way they're starting to tell those stories now, more and more now, is to tap into data to tell those stories. Because if you look at competitors like Under Armour, they're really leaning hard into the data and technology space. So Nike needs to figure out a way to create the human connection with the data that it's capturing to showcase that everybody's an athlete. So they did a campaign in 2014 that was called Outdo You, which was actually a campaign that targeted all the people who were using Nike Plus and the running tracking basically. And they served up customized videos to them that spoke to their run performance throughout the year. You ran 10,000 miles, you ran a lot of trails, you ran this race, you did all of these great things in this customized animated video. And at the end of the video, it said in 2015, outdo you. So it's leaning into this kind of key insight that people who run are obsessive about data. They want to know how far they ran, how fast they ran, times, all of those different types of things. So let's pull all the data that we're capturing and that we're naturally generating from consumers based on their behaviors of using our apps and start to serve them personalized, custom content that makes them feel more and more like an athlete and wants them to continue to use our product, moving into 2015. Another great example from Nike is the fact that if you go into with that Nike Plus program, Nike Plus actually has a developer program. So if you are a third-party app, you can tap into the Nike Plus data and ecosystem and start to push that into your app. So we've seen it with like Garmin and TomTom and different apps, but what's interesting about this one is it's actually open source in certain countries. Like in Australia, the Nike Plus data is open source. So if you're, say, McDonald's, you can actually tap into their data and make menu recommendations to people based on what their fitness levels are. You ran 10 miles, you get a Big Mac. You didn't run, you get a salad. Sorry. And start to really tap into what their fitness behaviors are. Kind of the Nike Plus goes into the wearable space, and Apple is really operating, it's really leaning hard into that wearable space with the Apple Watches, and they're really using that to, continue to help kind of operate in this sort of tension around humanizing computers. And one of the best ways that they can do that is through their use of wearables and their use of sensors and the sensors and the data all those sensors are capturing. So, if you look at something like the Apple Watch, none of this was actually released in the Apple Watch 2 because they leaned hard into the fitness space when it came out a couple days ago. But Apple is working on the technology to embed more sensors into the Apple Watch. So doing things like measuring the conductivity of your skin, which looks at your sort of like arousal levels, positive or negative, and whether or not you're happy or mad or angry or anything like that. And they're also looking at different things like blood pressure sensors and to track those types of things. And what that does is it allows Apple to be more predictive and allowed to be a little more clairvoyant and react and start to predict your needs and then also react to your needs as well. So if they see that through their conductivity sensors, oh, hey, Mike, you look a little stressed. Would you like me to pull up the Headspace app so you can meditate for a minute? So it starts to predict what you need based on all of these different types of things. We're starting to see that too they actually purchased Emodient, which is a facial recognition sensor. So we could eventually come to a time where if your iPad or your iPhone or whatever it may be is starting to read your face, it can then predict your needs based on facial recognition. Mike, you seem angry. Do you want me to play some jazz music to calm you down? You seem happy. Do you want me to play some uplifting music to make you, to continue the mood? Those types of things, and reacting to, those behaviors and those human emotions that it's seeing from you. And this Apple example is kind of a great segue into sort of our future connected world. And this is kind of where I get into a little bit of futurology, things that are coming that we should be aware for that are allowing us to capture data in ways that we've never thought possible before. A great example is around like the Internet of Things, where we take something like the Internet of Things. And this was the by far biggest topic at CES out here in Las Vegas back in January, where you were seeing everything from connected phone or connected homes to I saw connected forks and connected toilet seats. I mean, everything was wired to the internet. Don't ask me why there's connected toilet seats, but there were. But what this does is it's starting to help us understand human behaviors better and predict those needs based on what they're doing in their home. What are you ordering from your Amazon, your Amazon Echo? How often are you going to your fridge? What's in your fridge? How often are you turning on your lights and controlling the power in your home? All of these different things are different behavioral data points that brands can start to tap into and engage consumers in a new way. Problem is with all the Internet of Things, it's closed ecosystem right now. So the brands that are working in this space aren't talking to one another yet. But eventually there will be a world and a time where these brands do talk to one another. So imagine a day where you have a Whirlpool fridge, Whirlpool smart fridge. That Whirlpool smart fridge knows what's in your fridge at every moment. And it knows that you're low on Coke. And so it'll send you a ping notification to your smartphone saying, hey, you're low on Coke. You need to go to the store to get some more. And then Kroger will come in and say, hey, we've got Coke on sale. you should go to this location to get Coke because it's closest to your way home. So here's a Google map of how to get there fastest from work, which is where you're at right now. So we're going to eventually become to a point where all of these things are talking to one another, and it's going to have to force us to create new ways to connect with consumers, because where we're getting to is it's eventually going to lead us to a screenless future, where we're not going to be looking at screens anymore. We're going to have to be engaging consumers in a way that's not as visual anymore. And we're going to have to start thinking things like sensory design, sound design, touch design, and how do we engage with consumers on these different sort of platforms and these different sort of levels. This example right here is from Magic Leap, which is a new AR secretive sort of startup that's gotten funding from basically everybody. And they are developing technology that actually pushes visuals right into your eyeballs. So you don't need a screen anymore. It's implanting the visual right in your eye. So there's, like I said, no point in a screen. You're seeing it through Amazon Echo, where you're able to just say, hey, Alexa, order me some more notebooks. And you never have to engage with an Amazon screen ever again. And it's bringing up ways for brands to start to tap into these different things. Like through Amazon Echo, you can actually create Alexa skills. So I believe it's Diageo has one where you can go to your Amazon Echo and say, hey Alexa, teach me how to make this cocktail. And they'll teach you exactly how to make the cocktail step by step using Diageo liquor. So it's a new way that Diageo is looking into connecting with consumers without using a screen and serving up a traditional ad model. But before we get to a screenless future, we've got to deal with chatbots. So I don't know if you guys have been reading about chatbots, but basically it's a robot that responds to you, and it's usually used for customer service or CRM information right now, helping people book things or order things. But chatbots are being used in an interesting way, because what they're doing is they're actually starting to look at how you can engage consumers with a chatbot in a way that doesn't involve around customer service. An interesting one is actually Mattel put a chatbot inside of a Barbie. So, little girls that are playing with Barbies can actually have conversations with their Barbie, and their Barbie responds to them in real time. And so it's just a simplistic way to further that engagement. But if we suspend belief for a second in this Barbie example, say that you were allowed to track what kids are doing and how they're engaging online. If we know that how little Susie is talking to her Barbie, we can use natural language processing to figure out how Barbie should react to her, using the words that little Susie uses, bringing up conversations that little Susie and her have had in the past. So it becomes less of this inanimate object as a doll, but now it's her friend. Heck, you can even have Barbie say, hey, you need to buy me a new dream house, and then sell more product. But it's just a different way that you can start to look into chatbots and the technology that they're bringing to the forefront. And then connected cars, Toyota and all the different connected cars that we saw here at CES. But one of the biggest ones that could create a lot of possibility and potential is Google with their self-driving car. Because for Google, this isn't a car, it's data on wheels. So if you're connected into the Google ecosystem through Gmail and Calendar and GChat and all of those different platforms that they have, the car is just another touch point. And so now they can see if you've been Googling Thai recipes for a dinner party that you have scheduled on your calendar, and then Whole Foods can tap into that and serve up a recipe on a screen in your Google car to say, here's the ingredients for the Thai recipe that you've been looking up. There's a Whole Foods down the street. You should go check it out. I've got a lot of food examples in here. But and then so it basically is starting to help brands interject and participate with you in new ways. Because now, if you look at the Google car, if you're not driving anymore, the entire thing gives an opportunity to create content and engage with consumers, because you're not focused on the road, you're focused on everything else. So just to kind of boil it down to, kind of wrap everything up and kind of summarize all the kind of points here, is that questions that we should really start to think about asking ourselves as it relates to kind of data and using that to create emotional connections. It's, looking at the problems that we're trying to solve. How does data support that? What are those tensions that we're starting to operate in? It's, looking at how we can make data be in service of that overarching mission. at the different inferences and the unique data sources that we can tap into that are traditionally held resources and use those to create connections with consumers. What are those ways that we can start to combine those with emotional triggers and behaviors? And then lastly, most importantly, how do we measure our impact? And what are those proper measurement systems and plans that we put in place that we can track and iterate and revise so that way we can continue to create emotional connections with consumers based on what we're doing. So just kind of as a kind of final thoughts, just sort of some guiding principles from my standpoint as it relates to kind of activating data and targeting, talking to consumers and creating those connections. Is the first one is everything is media. Every single thing out there today is a consumer touch point, from traditional stuff like TV ads and radio spots to social to product to in-store. Everything is media now, and media is so fragmented. There's so many ways in to talk to consumers. Tension creates opportunity. I've kind of drilled this one to death, I feel like, in this presentation, but tensions are where our opportunity lies to help solve those contradictions and to help solve those problems that consumers face, and ways that we can insert our brands into that world. Beauty and seamless simplicity. So that horror movie example is the Horror Film Fest example is a perfect one, where it wasn't hard, and it wasn't invasive, and it wasn't interruptive, and it wasn't it wasn't this big, bold, audacious thing. The beauty is in the simplicity, because it seamlessly spoke to consumers in a way that was natural to them, used the data that they were okay with you using, and created a deep connection with consumers. And then the last one is this idea of design for reciprocity. And this is kind of my personal sort of favorite, in the sense that nowadays, since we're collecting so much more and more data about consumers, we need to deliver them something of value in return. We need to create these reciprocal engagements with consumers, where if we're asking for information about them, or we're asking for their attention or their time or their engagement or whatever it may be, we need to give them something of value in return, because we're at a point with the fragmentation of media and the kind of the landscape of where everything's at, that attention is the most scarce resource that we have with consumers nowadays. So if we're going to ask for their attention, we need to use it wisely and engage them in the right way. So, thank you.
Michael, thank you very much. I'd like to open it up to Q&A. We've got a microphone over here for Vi for anybody that has any questions for Michael.
Excuse me. A lot of this seems like a high-level branding for big companies. How can DR firms, direct response products, take advantage of the data in the way that you've described to create these 3 levels of connections?
Yeah, I think that kind of going to that question, how can DR type companies use this sort of like high-level brand building type connections, is to look at it not in silos. It's a cyclical relationship where each of these efforts shouldn't be done, mutually exclusive from one another. You have to understand what's going on from a high-level brand building standpoint with with all of your messaging, with all of your consumer engagement, and start to figure out what insights and what things are you learning about your consumers that can apply to more of those lower funnel, hardworking kind of media and messaging efforts that we're all focusing on. So it's how do we combine those 2 worlds to create this engagement that starts to kind of use a kind of an antiquated approach, but drives them down that consumer funnel, because it should all work seamlessly.
Anybody else? Okay, Michael, thank you very much. We really enjoyed it. Thank you.